Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the BA Zone's pre-show, which is only going to be a minute long tonight because we're all running late. We've been a little busy, but tonight we're going to be talking about localization. So if you know anybody who's interested in the topic, please pass us along. And if you have any comments during the show, please feel free to jump in. And like I said, we're going live right now. Hey, everybody, welcome to the BA Zone's live show. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on localization. I want to just thank everybody for stopping by tonight. And hello, everybody on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope. If you have any questions tonight, please feel free to comment, and we'll definitely answer your questions or comments during the show. And so let's get started. My name is Marianne Morrison, and Kathleen, my cohort, is behind the scenes tonight, and she is going to run our lovely intro video. So stay tuned for just a second. Get that cup of tea, put your feet up. We'll be going in just a second. Go ahead, Kath. You gotta love it. You gotta love that video. Okay, everyone. Tonight we're going to be talking about localization and why it's becoming a hot topic, and more folks are getting involved. Localization, I may lose my voice a little tonight, so hopefully not. But localization refers to the process of adapting or modifying software and content, even marketing, in order to easily translate it into other languages and cultures to meet the needs of those users, and obviously to get our product out there and to gain more customers. So all of the languages and cultures are specific to a location or a locale. So different markets obviously have different expectations that can range from language preferences in words or phrases to cultural expectations. And if you're going to take your product globally or internationally, you need to engage and communicate effectively, right? And you need to be able to get your point across as to what your product or your service, your application does. And you have to do that in a way that doesn't offend anyone, because, you know, things are, as they say, lost in translation. So tonight we're going to be talking about, you know, some of those best practices around of how you can handle localization. So translating your software into different languages presents a tremendous amount of issues, and we all know, right? So you can't just translate a particular content word for word because it may not make sense to someone else. So different languages may have different sentence structures, and the underlying meaning may be different. And sometimes the words don't translate at all. There's no other word or concept in another language for certain things. So you have to be aware of that as well. You have to have appropriate keywords for search engines. There's differences in collecting addresses. There's different formats. There's differences in managing international phone numbers, time zones. What is considered a work day? What are the holidays? What are people's schedules? There's difference in units of measure. You can have metric units, miles versus kilometers or kilometers, kilos versus pounds. You have to understand how to handle multiple currencies and exchanges for e-commerce. There's different payment methods and shipping methods. There's local and legal regulations as well. And one of the big ones is there is a lot of privacy rules that are highly specific to a given area. And there are the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, that are now enforced by governments, where they can literally sue you if you don't follow these type of, you know, privacy rules. So there's an tremendous amount to consider when you're trying to take something internationally. And there's multiple markets that you can get into. You know, there's the European market, there's the Asian market, all these different subcontinents. And it depends on, Are you willing to do this? And does the company have enough money to do this? Ideally, you would do this, before you have a product so that you can develop and design as you go. But in most cases, we typically design a product or a process or a service. And once we know that it's working locally within your own country, and you may not be from the United States, you may be from another country, but you try to make it work in your own country, and then you sort of expand your borders, right? So it happens a lot, and then we have to sort of work backwards to get all of the pieces in place that you need to when you're marketing outside of your own given country. So I'm losing my voice a little bit tonight. It's that lovely time of year. So just going to switch over for just a second. And okay. So let's get into the best practices, or some of the best practices. There's a tremendous amount of practices out there that you can do, and a lot of things that incorporate localization. But the first thing, as I said, you need to decide whether it's worth the expense. And it is going to be expensive, and there's different ways you can go about it. And you can try to promote English in a different country. English is spoken in many places, but there's an awful lot of untapped customers that English is not spoken, and it's certainly not spoken well enough to buy a product or a service. So, as I said, given all of these intricacies that occur with localization, you can never underestimate the actual complexity or the process of localizations. So the first thing you may want to do from a best practice is to research and hire either a translator, a translation company, or a localization service provider that uses translators and localization experts, because it helps to have someone in the area or the region that you're trying to market to. So you want to look for someone who will translate your content, not just literally, because it doesn't always work, but sort of with this, what they call transcreation. So it's sort of like they are conceptually rewriting some of your stuff so that it makes sense in the market that you're trying to attract. So it's actually just recreating it in the actual local language. Because as I said, some things just don't transfer over appropriately. In addition to translating into the local languages, you may be translating into a local dialect, right? But you can't translate down too close into that dialect, because then you start to lose customers. So there's all these things to consider. Other things to consider if you're looking at going out and getting a service is, do they have their own translators? How many translations would be included in your pricing? Is there a publishing schedule? Is their upload process manual or automatic? And do they have a team of translators so you don't have to hire your own translators? Some translation companies also offer different types of translation connectors or multilingual APIs that can integrate with many companies who have, sort of multiple disparate systems that they can push content out to the platform, and it will automatically come back to the appropriate system. So it's all these different levels of services you can get with these different types of companies. If you do decide to hire or engage a translation company instead of just using some type of software, which isn't always effective, you need to make sure that you provide them with a lot of information in order that they do the translations correctly. So what I mean by that is, glossaries, style guides or style sheets, product marketing information, so that conceptually they understand your product and service that you're trying to sell or provide, so that when they do try to do that transcreation, they're interpreting your product and services correctly. So it's not just about translating or modifying your content, you have to modify your approach. So when you're going globally or internationally, you're going to have to create a standard translation process. It's all about process, right? To make sure everything is moving smoothly. And you can see where this might be an issue if you're trying to market to 1 to 24 different countries. There's going to be it's a nightmare just in creating the time zones of all these. When do I send? Who do I send it to? Where does it go? So or if you have multiple translators that you've hired who are working independently and you're not using some type of a translation team, you have to have a process in place or it will completely get out of control. So a lot of people use cloud-based translation management systems to centralize, storage and shared access and things that'll automatically send out content and bring it back. So it helps a tremendous amount instead of having your stuff local, not localization, but having all of your information in local servers, getting it up into the cloud. That definitely helps. So a standardized approach, when you're going to send the content, if we're developing our applications and processes all the time. So it has to follow some type of content change may be affected by some type of release or iteration or development piece that you're putting in place. So these are all factors that you have to consider, and you definitely want to lay that process out of scheduling and pushing and pulling data. And if you have some type of downtime, all these things you need to consider with the process, payment plans, any of those details. Create a standard process. And that's what we do as business analysts anyway, right? We're always sort of streamlining and flowing out a process. So make sure you do that for your translation process. What you can do within the application itself to help with the localization process or to even reduce the cost of the localization process, there's a bunch of things that we need to consider in order to minimize the translation impact and the user perception. So, for example, when you create style guides, and you can do this based on accepted standards for the particular locale that you're marketing to, and you can track these ahead of time, sort of create these style sheets so that they go out the door so everyone knows, especially when we're testing, if it's coming across correctly. So things like that are standard, not standard across globally, but they are standard for the locale. Dates, the format of the date, is it day, month, year, or is it, month, day, year? Is it year first? Is our date spelled out? Is it a combination of spelling and numbers, or are they just all numerals? Time, how they're managing their time. Is it based on, a 12-hour, 24-hour, is it 1,400 hours or whatever that military time is, 2:00, wasn't in the military. But weights, how weights are handled, a presentation of names. It's really interesting. We have, first name, last name, but in a lot of countries, they have the given name, the family name, and then sometimes those two things are reversed. And the family name is first and their first name is last, or they just have one name. So you have to account for these different presentation styles. And also keep in mind that, where a user lives does not necessarily determine the language that they're going to speak, right? Or you can have a country that speaks more than one language. So you have to be able to give these users options. So, for example, you may live in a country where you speak a certain language, but you want to use the currency for that country. So there's different things you have to think about and what the impact on the user will be. And if you can sort of preset those based on locale or country code, you have that up front, and a lot of those decisions are already made. So these are things we can do as business analysts There's a lot of things, obviously, they can do in the back end. Developers can do a tremendous amount as well for the localization, but we're just going to try to keep it specific tonight to what business analysts would typically do. If you're going to be working with languages as well, there's a difference sometimes between a really good example is the English that we use in the US versus the type of English that is used in Great Britain. So you always want to use a language with a country code, because there could be alternate spellings, there could be alternate date formats, et cetera, between two countries that have a shared language. And you want to keep, as far as language goes, if you keep it very simple, the language, and free of any type of jargon, it's going to translate much easier. You know, like I said, a lot of concepts and words and phrases really don't translate to a different country, as well as jokes and everything else. So, you know, my jokes probably fall flat over there just as much as they do here. But you just want to keep the language as simple as possible. Also keep the translation costs down as well. As far as the interface goes, or the layout of the interface or the pages, again, style sheets help tremendously. Or, you know, you might be able to put a code in for a direction, a property, you know, based on locale, because the design of fields, for example, input fields, are going to have to be adaptable for text flow specifically. You know, some countries, the written language reads from left to right. Other places from right to left. Some are bidirectional, and some are vertical. You know, in Asia, Asian languages often require they have a tremendous amount of symbols that have tens of thousands of symbols for their language. So you have to accommodate those fields so that they can adapt to the different type of direction as well as size. So you want to plan ahead for, you know, we typically say a field will have 25 characters, but when you're talking about translating a certain word into a foreign language, that small little field can potentially expand to a much bigger field for the same exact word. So you have to, and sometimes it can be as much as, you know, 30 to 45% bigger. So you want the interface to adjust the size for the various translation lengths. And the translations also may change the structure or the order of content or sentences or grammar elements, or it might have different prefixes or accents. So those type of things, creating those fields so that they're adaptable, or at least documenting the fact that they have to adapt to that. If you're using graphics or icons or images or even colors, you have to make sure that they also translate well culturally. Some of them don't transfer well at all. So research is a good thing here. And if you have a translation company, they'll help you with this as well too. But there are lots of things, like certain places you can't show hands, you can't show feet. There are cultural differences and sometimes barriers to what you may want to sell or what you may want to educate on. So keep in mind that there can also be more than one culture within a given area or a region. So you have to, it's a sort of a balancing act of what you're putting in or how you're separating that by regions. And I was fascinated by this because I really didn't, and I really want to look at this more, but colors are very interesting too. And in doing some of my research on colors, I didn't realize that, for example, Europe, blue symbolizes trust and serenity. And yet in China, blue symbolizes femininity, which there goes that whole pink blue thing we got going over here. So if you have, you know, any type of colors, you have to understand what those colors might mean in a given country. And it's like working for the United Nations. It's really quite interesting. So if you have graphics or images with text, just to make it easier for translation purposes. Try to get that text off of that image, because you don't want somebody going in there and trying to look at the code to figure out how they remove, how do they translate that image. And if you have any type of embedded text, and this is pretty much a really good idea anyway. Kathleen and I have come across a lot of coding in software where things are hard coded in the code instead of being, in a table or a file of some type. So if you have any embedded strings in the code, that might be messages or titles or labels, date, time, currency, format, any of those type of things that are embedded in the code, you want to pull them out of the code and put them into some type of resource files so that they can be easily translated. You really don't want someone going in there and trying to interpret or reinterpret text that's attached to some type of an image or actually in the code itself. And those are some of the things. And the last thing that I wanted to say, and obviously there are a lot more things to this, but we wanted to keep it to a half-hour show. You really want to test, whether you're using some type of software, whether you're using some type of platform or service. You want to test all the time. You specifically want to test around the privacy issues and any type of laws and regulations. That's huge, because that can cost you a tremendous amount of money, and if they could prosecute you. And you want to test the translation if you can. I mean, developers can do this, with automated test cases, and just see how things come across in coding and version of software. And every time you release a piece of software, test, and make sure that, you have other people taking a look at it to make sure that things are graphically showing up in the right places, fields are showing up in the right places, because, you're translating images and text, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to test out the wazoo. So we'll take a little break. I mean, those are some of the best practices. Again, there are developer best practices as far as different things with file formats, etc. But those are just some of the ones that we would potentially deal with, and you can read up on it. It's a very fascinating subject, and we're going to take a little break right now just to do some business. Thanks for you folks watching out there on Periscope and Facebook. I hope you're finding this entertaining or interesting. And if you have any comments, please feel free to drop them over, and we'll just put up here in case, you can find us in all the usual places where you can get a hold of us. If you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Periscope, Facebook, YouTube, and obviously on the bazone.com. And feel free to drop us if you have any things you're interested in. Most of our show topics come from you, the users, dropping us suggestions. So please do that. We'd love to hear from you. And let's see, what else we got? Well, we'll just wrap this up. We're getting near the end of the evening. So just to wrap it up, I mean, why would you want to get into this? Now, let me tell you, I was out snooping around, and there are job openings for localization business analysts. They are out there. And it's a different field. It's interesting. It's multicultural. If you're interested in that, it's tons of rules. And if you like documenting at that level of detail, which I love, it looks like it will continue to expand as our global markets continue to expand. And, localization practices are all about, expanding the company's reach and getting their product out there and getting additional business. So, and you want to create an experience for those users that would be the same experience we would expect when we're out there on a website. And it's ultimately about increasing visitors to your website or retention of people, um, and to create the best experience possible for them. And localization will certainly do that for you, whether you try to do it internally or you definitely hire a platform and do your research if you're going to do that. Make sure you do a market analysis of who's out there and specifically who hires their own folks. Otherwise you're going to have that additional expense as well. And make sure you are well versed on all of the privacy rules and regulations, because going forward, that's going to become more to the forefront than it ever has in the past. So, in closing, this is just sort of if you have a product and you want to go global, go international, this will help you to begin to build a strong foundation to do that. So I hope you've found this interesting. And again, if you have any comments or questions, we know a lot of folks watch this after the fact. So you can always drop us a line at thebazone.com. And you can also sign up for our newsletter. We don't do anything with that information. As we said before, we do believe in karma, but you can follow up on things that are going on and classes that are being offered. And next week, not next week, in 2 weeks actually, on the 30th, which just happens to be Mischief Night here in the U.S., Mischief Night, Goosey Night, All Hallows Eve, we will be doing our 1-year anniversary show. So if you'd like to join us, don't want to miss that one, because that's all the fun stuff we've done. It's been a year. Yes, it's been a year since we've been doing this. And we really do appreciate all the hearts and thanks and applause that you guys give us. And we're here for you, do this for you. So join us for that. We should have a blast doing that. And I think, let me just check with Kathleen here. I've got her on the bat phone back here. So I think that's it. We're going to wrap it up for this evening. Again, thank you so much for taking the time, stopping by, and go global, go global, stay local, and have a great night, everybody. Great week. And we'll see you next Tuesday. Take care, everyone.